Morning, everyone. So I hope you're all well. I wanted to come on and do a bit of a film this morning with the start of Mental Health Awareness Week. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Philippa Davis. I'm an author of a recent play talking about baby loss. I spend a lot of time campaigning and supporting people affected by baby loss. But also, some of you may not know, I'm also a postgraduate biologist who has spent quite a lot of time lecturing in biology and physiology. And so, I suppose what I wanted to do at the start of mental health awareness was really talk about what mental health is. Scientists are very good at making things sound quite complicated, and there are very few people I know who actually truly understand what mental health really is. So I wanted to spend a few minutes kind of talking about this because I always think that if you understand something better and you have a better idea of what it is you're talking about, it becomes less scary, and that in itself will just reduce stress levels. So, mental health, what is it? In its simplest format, mental health is just a state of psychological and emotional well-being. Okay, it's something that everybody has. But why do we have mental health and why do we need to look after it? For those of you that have a car, we know that when we get into the car and the car is performing exactly as it should be, we know that everything within that car is fine. So from tyre pressures to oil levels to water levels to all the electronic gadgets are all absolutely fine and there's not a problem. When there is a problem, we take that car to the garage. And just to make sure that there's a reduced chance of problems coming up, we get that car serviced, we get it MOT'd, so that we know that to the best of our ability, we are keeping that vehicle at its optimal level in terms of how it performs and how it behaves. Now, as human beings, we're not dissimilar. So, if you go right back to the beginning of time, when humans first evolved, our biggest priority was survival. Survival of the species is one of the key things, and we haven't lost that. We haven't lost that trait, that need to survive. Now, ideally, what we need to do is maintain the world internally and externally at the same optimal level the whole time. But we know that there are factors that happen, things that happen. You know, we don't live on an island on our own, and there are all sorts of environmental conditions that change and alter that mean that we're constantly fighting to maintain what's called a homeostasis, but basically is just maintaining an environment that gives us as close to ideal conditions to allow our body to function. When I taught biology, I used to talk about actually the simplicity of the human body and bodies as a whole, whether that's animals or people, that actually we are only made up of cells and chemicals. Yes, we are a very advanced kind of being put together, formed of cells and chemicals, but actually, basically, we are just cells and chemicals. And we constantly, every cell within our body constantly fights to maintain this stable environment to make sure that we work at our best all the time. But as I said, that can't happen because of changes that go on, because of invaders into the body. We know at the moment we have the issue with COVID-19, but also externally we're fighting forces from other people, from environment. So basically, what we have is a little bit like in a car. If things go wrong or things become non-optimal, we get warning lights. So the reason that our mental health is so important in terms of maintaining it and keeping our mental health good is because that mental health, that our mind, and it works as This just the same way as a warning system within a car. So, when things go wrong or aren't optimal and are significant enough, our body will give us a warning, and it is our mental health that we need to maintain in order to ensure that our warning system is as good as it can be. So, if we start at the simplest level, everybody goes through periods of stress. Okay, what is stress? And again, in its simplest form, stress is the inability to cope with changes that are happening either within our body. It could be chemical imbalances, it could be invaders of viruses or bugs, it could be that we're not giving our body sufficient fuel for it to work in an optimal way. We will get certain warning systems. We will get certain warnings come on. So with bugs and viruses, we might get a temperature, which is our kind of warning. They are our physiological warning signs. But every change like that is actually a form of stress. And it could be, if we look at external changes and external factors, such as maybe bumping the car or falling over or somebody being abusive or bereavement or anything which is kind of outside of our normal optimal level, what happens is we get a warning, and that warning will trigger our stress. And stress is a totally normal reaction to a change in our environment, either internally or externally. And the stress, we know, tends to include things like increasing heart rate, increasing circulation, increasing our breathing rate, maybe making our breathing more shallow, maybe altering our appetite, maybe making us stronger or faster. Stress is our, I suppose, warning sign and our warning signal, our coping mechanism for trying to fix things very quickly. So, for example, if you go to cross a road and you step out into the road and a car comes speeding around the corner, we become stressed very, very quickly. We move into emergency mode. Our bodies change so that any non-essential requirements in that body at that particular moment disappear, and our full focus goes on to increasing heart rate, increasing blood to the muscles, and getting us out of there before anything horrendous happens to us. So that is our warning signal. And just the same way as, a car flying around the corner, if something else goes wrong, so such as things like bereavement or even things like money stress, we've taught ourselves to become more stressed with the environment we live in. We know that to maintain an optimal environment, we need money coming in because we need to buy food and we need to pay bills. And so the stresses going back to caveman days, which were just simply survival and hunting and looking after babies so that they reached a certain age so that they could carry on multiplying and, continue the species. Now our lives have become much more complicated and much more complex, things that we've created ourselves. So stress is basically triggered by the inability to cope, something changed in your environment. And that is all managed by our mental health. Now, when you take a step further, you move into depression. So if you have significantly long, because stress is not designed to last for any period of time. It is literally a quick, we've got to adjust things to get things back to normal so that we're no longer in danger. If that stress continues for any period of time, or we get multiple amounts of stress through our lives, that then heads into depression. Depression, as with everything, depression is basically lowering something. So depression is actually lowering the function of our body. And that is to try and maintain maintain us in a functioning way. So if we're in a state of stress and we're only managing, you're only catering for emergency things like locomotor muscles, your arms, your legs, your heart, and you're not focusing on your digestive system or other non-essential areas of your body, if that happens for a long period of time, the way to safeguard that is to reduce the functions in your body. So just almost heading into a semi-hibernation. So if you think about somebody who's depressed or you suffered with depression yourself, you'll know that that tends to be things like you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, you're tired all the time, you can't be bothered eating, you feel very flat emotionally. If you think about that, those are basically, that is just us catering for essential functions and us safeguarding being able to stay alive by depleting or reducing, depressing your normal functions. So that in its simplest form is what depression actually is. It's your body trying to safeguard your functioning. Then you can head a step further. So if you head a step further, you head towards things like post-traumatic stress disorder. And that tends to deal with things that are extreme traumas. So extreme things that happen to people we've associated with armed forces on the battlefield, but any extreme trauma. So, for example, I was diagnosed with PTSD following stillbirth and multiple losses of babies. And that's because that is something that we really, again, like soldiers on a battlefield, it shouldn't happen. Therefore, we have no rule book. So what happens with PTSD is that in your stressful periods where you've jumped out of the way of a car flying around the corner, at that point in time, that stress level is needed to ensure your safety. With PTSD, what happens is you end up maintaining that peak point of stress because your body thinks, your body and your mind have been put into almost a shock system where your body and your mind now think that that emergency level has become the normal. And so that really is it at its extreme. And what we find with people who struggle with mental health problems is that some mental health problems are triggered. So they're triggered by situations or occurrences or, illnesses. And some things are triggered, some stresses and depressions are triggered by literally an internal imbalance. Now, the thing is that depression and stress and PTSD are actually very normal. I know that, what does normal mean? But what I mean by that is the reactions, those particular reactions are actually normal. They are normal for everybody, and that is why anybody can suffer with mental health problems, because we have them inbuilt through evolutionary processes and through what we've developed ourselves. They are inbuilt in us, and they only occur when our environment, either internally or externally, becomes outside of optimal for functioning. So actually, it's really simple and straightforward. And the reason we need to look after our mental health is because if we look after our mental health, it provides us with the best trigger and best warning system that things aren't right. And if we listen to our mental health and we realise things aren't right, we can then do something about it. And we do something about it by asking for help. So in lower levels of stress, things go back to normal. After you've jumped out of the way of a car, things go back to normal. But in extended periods of stress and depression and ultimately PTSD, things can't go back the way they were on their own. So they require more support. And that could be in the form of antidepressants, it could be in the form of counselling, it could be in the form of just talking and just support. We can all get back to what we should be. Yes, due to the learning experiences we have, those are always going to sit with us. However, we can get better again. We can get better. All we have to do is ask for help. So at the start of Mental Health Awareness Week, all I want to say to people is Mental health problems are normal. They're our normal response to things being wrong. All we have to do is ask for help. Don't sit on your own. Don't stress on your own. Just ask for help. There are many, many organisations out there. Samaritans, Mind, SANS for baby loss. There are lots and lots of support organisations out there. Start with your GP, anybody. But don't just sit there, because what you're experiencing is perfectly normal. What you just have to do is find your way back to an optimal environment for your body. So please, please don't isolate yourself. Just ask for help.